Super Rugby schedule for 2020. I've had a look at the schedule to see which teams get the better end of the deal and which teams don't fare so well. I'm mainly looking at the placement of the buys in terms of being a large factor as to whether it's a tough schedule or an easy schedule. Do they have blocks of away games together? What kind of starts of the season do they have? All these kind of things. I'm not particularly looking at what teams do they play. Like, what is the strength of your opposition throughout the year? After a World Cup, it's kind of hard to gauge where these teams are at, but I guess that's something we'll get a handle on as the season goes on. But yeah, I'll go through the 15 teams and kind of give them it's a good schedule, it's an okay schedule, or it's kind of a poor schedule, and kind of a key reason or two why I think that schedule is good or bad. One thing I really don't like about Super Rugby is that the buys seem to be random. And I know that populating a competition with 15 teams based in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina, and Japan, plus Singapore, is definitely tough, and it's something I wouldn't be able to do, but I feel like they could certainly do a better job than what they do with some smart people planning the schedule, because essentially the Sunwolves and the Jaguares will generally always have the toughest travel time because there's nobody locally based around them to play against, and then the South African teams all have a 4-game stretch where they have to play 4 away games, touring Australia and New Zealand. So, whereas, for the New Zealand and Australian team, it's 2 games where they have to travel to South Africa, or maybe South Africa and Argentina. So, yeah. Anyway, I'll go through the squads and you guys can let me know your thoughts. The Blues could certainly use an easy schedule, but I think their schedule is not the best. This could just be the Blues fan in me. They don't get the first bye, until round number 9. So before round 9, they've already played the Chiefs and the Crusaders at home. They've had their trip to South Africa to play the Bulls and Stormers, followed up by a trip to Wellington to play the Hurricanes, and then a couple of home games. So there's a decent amount of home games in that opening stint. But the fact that they've got Crusaders, South Africa, Hurricanes away, those 4 games I think could be pretty killer. And then that bye finally comes halfway through the competition. They have a second bye in the penultimate round. So I think by that stage, with such a tough start, the Blues may already be out of it. They could have used a nice easy start and a bye next to that trip to South Africa, but it is not to be. The Chiefs, I've kind of given their one. It's okay. It's not a helicopter flying over my house. Their first 4 games, 2 of them are home, 2 of them are away, and they've got a bye. So it's a decently placed bye in the 5th round. Blues away, Crusaders at home, Sunwolves away, Brumbies at home. So it's not particularly easy or particularly tough. Then a bye. They do have equally that trip to South Africa, which is bookended by 2 games in New Zealand at home. So again, it's not ideal. And then the other bye is in the 12th round. So what I do like about their schedule, though, is the schedule. I can't make my mind up about how I want to say that. Of their final 4 games, 3 of them are at home. So if you're looking for some points to make a run to the playoffs, you got 3 of your final games at home. That last one is away to the Crusaders. So you probably want to do all that hard work before you get that final away game to the Crusaders. But yeah, it's not too bad. The buys, I think, are pretty evenly placed, which is good for them. The Hurricanes, I think the Hurricanes have got a pretty good schedule. I think it's good. They do start in South Africa again. They have a thing about starting in South Africa. They play the Stormers, and then they play the Jaguares. But the good thing about having that game first is you can travel early and get you guys acclimatized to play the Stormers, so it's not going to be too bad. You've then got the trip to Argentina, which is what it is. The bye, I feel, is stupidly placed because you got South Africa, Argentina. Ideally, you get a bye there in round 3. because then you get a rest, you get back to New Zealand, you get back to New Zealand time. But no. So they got a game in South Africa, a game in Argentina, then a game at home against the Sharks, and then you get the bye, and then another home game. So the bye is between 2 home games. I feel is kind of wasted a week earlier, and it makes a world of difference. But either way, they can't complain too much because they've got that time before round 1 to get ready. I'm not sure what their pre-season fixture's like, but either way, it could have been planned around. Yeah, it's a tough finish to the season, though, because they do have, opposite to the Chiefs, of their final 4 games, 3 of them are away. No, 2 of the 3. Sorry, I'm reading the wrong line. Their final 3 games, 2 of them are away. Away to the Highlanders, away to the Reds, and then home to the Waratahs at the end. So the byes are kind of evenly spaced. Relatively, I guess round 4 is seemingly a bit early to have a bye, but again, I would have preferred it in round 3. Either way, I think the Hurricanes one is not too bad. The Crusaders, I thought last season had a pretty nice schedule, but this year I think it's just okay. Theirs is the one where the final 4 games, 3 of them are away. I can't imagine the Crusaders are looking to those final 4 games to pick up points to suddenly qualify for the playoffs. You got to think they're going to have already made it. But last season, if memory serves, their final bye was like the last week. So almost like a rest week just to get ready for the playoffs. Whereas this time, their final bye is in round 11. So you still got 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18 to play. A trip to South Africa among those games in round 16 and 17. Home game against the Chiefs. It's at home, but still, it's going to be a tough one, you would think, against the Chiefs. So the Crusaders, come playoff time, may be more tired than they were in 2019. This year, 2020, will be perhaps a bit tougher. So, still, it's not terrible, but it's not great. The Highlanders, I'm not a huge fan of their fixtures list. They have the bye in the opening round, and that seems to be a thing with them as well. I'm sure they've had the bye, was it the opening round of this year or the year before? I don't think many teams would like the bye. Either the first or second round is not ideal. I think it might have been the second round they had it this year. So you get that one game under your belt, and before you can get any momentum, you've got the bye. So they've got the bye first up, which is a chance to get extra prep under your belt. But I think by the time round 1 comes along, everyone is just ready to play. They are done with the preseason stuff. They want to put some stuff on the field, but nope, they've got the first round. And then they've got a big stint of games. Most of the first ones are in Australia and New Zealand. New Zealand, Australia, New Zealand, Australia. So it's back and forth, back and forth. Then to South Africa, then to Argentina, then back home to Dunedin. And then the Crusaders before they get a bye. Crusaders at home, a bye in round 10. And then from rounds 11 to 18, there's no break because they had that bye early. So if there is a team that's going to be tired come playoff time, it's the Highlanders. I mean, they do have the Blues away in their final game, so maybe that's an easy one. But yeah, I think that run-in for the Highlanders will be tough. And that first stint is no easier because, yeah, there's a trip to South Africa and Argentina bookended by games in Dunedin. So it's not a great one. On to the Aussie Conference, the Brumbies. I think their one looks pretty nice. They start with 3 games at home. No other team has 3 games at home to start with. The closest, I think, is the Bulls. No, it's the Stormers have got 2. The Jaguares have got 3 as well. They're the only 2 teams that have got such a nice, easy run-in at the start anyway. So 3 games at home. An away game, then a bye, and then the bye is preceding a trip to Japan. So if they want to do any extra travel prep with that bye time, they've got it there available. And then they've got a stint of games followed by a trip to South Africa. But the trip to South Africa is preceded by a bye. So if you want to use that bye time to go to South Africa and get acclimatized, they have the option. That's how byes should work in Super Rugby. I think the Brumbies have got a nice schedule. The Waratahs, I've given it an okay. They've kind of got away games at the start and the end of the season with a bunch of home games in the middle. So 3 games, 2 of them away at the start, a bye, and then home, away, home. So you get 4 out of 5 games at home. Trip to South Africa, followed by a home game, followed by a bye. So again, it's that stupid thing where you have to go back from South Africa to play 1 home game and then get a bye, and then you get another game at home. So why have a bye between 2 home games where it doesn't really mean anything except the fact that you get to chill out at home for an extra week? But then the final 4 games, 3 of them are away. So it's a nice middle and then tough at the ends. So we'll see how the Waratahs go. The Reds, another team I think who could use a nice schedule. I don't think really get it. They don't get a home game until round 4. So they start away to the Brumbies, immediately travel to South Africa to play the Lions, and then immediately over to Argentina to play the Jaguares, and then 2 home games. So they finally get their home games in round 4, and then the Crusaders away, then the Bulls at home. So they don't get a bye until round 8, which is pretty late. But to be honest, by that point their season could already be dead and buried. If they lose the 3 away games, home against the Sunwolves may be the perfect game to have after the trip around the world. But then Sharks is going to be tough, Crusaders away is going to be tough, Bulls at home will be tough, and then a bye. So I'm not sure if they can overcome the start of that season. We will see. But I think I would rather be on the board early and then have to pick up a few at the end rather than be really chasing and having to win all the games at the end, because I think that is tough. But the Rebels, who are next, have proven that having a big lead on the table doesn't usually mean jack, because they've thrown away those big leads in the past. Their schedule, I think, is okay. They start in Japan, again, which gives them the chance to prepare overseas if they want. They do get a home game in round 3. They've got an awkward thing again with the bye being between 2 home games right before they travel to South Africa. So it would have been nice to have 2 home games in a row, then a bye, then a trip to South Africa, but instead it's home game, bye, home game, 2 away games in South Africa, and then back to Australia for another away game. So again, it's okay, but it just seems like not the best planning of the byes, but it does give them an extra break. 3 of their final 4 games are, 2 of their final 4 games are home, 1 is away and 1 is a bye. So in terms of maybe needing to pick up points at the end of the season, they've got a better run for it this year than previous years. The Sunwolves, theirs is okay. Again, they've got byes between a couple of home games. They got the bye in round 2. I think for the Sunwolves, though, a bye in round 1 or round 2 is actually not too bad, because the team usually being kind of cobbled together relatively last minute actually helps them. So yeah, an early bye for the Sunwolves may not be too bad. They've got trips to kind of between Australia and New Zealand for the first half of the season. What I do like, and what stops their schedule from being, I think, bad, is the fact that before they travel to South Africa, they do have the bye. So it's the bye, then the Lions, then the Bulls, and then home to play the Jaguares, and that game's in Singapore. Then home to the Waratahs, home to the Stormers. So a decent stint of games in Asia. So yeah, I think the byes for them actually work relatively well. It's not great, but it's okay. The Jaguares schedule, I think, again, it's okay for what it is. They do have the 3 home games at the start, which is good. Then 3 away games in South Africa, which I think is not too bad. It would have been nice if they could have fit the 4th one in, so that they only had to make 1 trip to South Africa. But 3 is not too bad. Then back to Argentina to play the Highlanders and the Stormers. What I do find tough about their schedule, I keep doing that, is there's no bye until round 9, which is late. And then their final bye is in round 16, so only 2 rounds to go. If they're in a playoff spot, that may actually work out pretty well. If they're chasing and needing points, then having that bye late on is not ideal. They do finish the season 2 rounds. 1 is home to the Bulls and then away to the Lions. So that's not the best way to finish. It'd be nice if they had a couple of home games, but again, they've got round 15 is home, 16 is a bye, and then 17 is at home again. So again, the bye between two home games, which I can only imagine is to give the guys some time to chill out. It saves the travel factor. You don't have to worry about that team for a week. But I just think in terms of the travel factor, it's a bit of a waste. It's an opportunity to give the teams a chance to travel and acclimatise for mine. The Sharks, I don't think the Sharks have got a very nice looking schedule for Super Rugby this coming season. They get one home game against the Bulls and immediately jump on a plane to travel to New Zealand and Australia, which I think is what the Stormers have had recently, but this time it's the Sharks. So away to the Highlanders, then the Hurricanes, then the Reds, then the Rebels. Back home to South Africa to play the Jaguares, to play the Stormers, and to play the Chiefs. So again, you don't get your bye until round 9, which is late. There's no rest. South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, South Africa. Then a rest. I think it's tough. I think that's a tough start to the season. And again, if they do fall behind, then they may struggle to catch up. They have the bye in the final round, which if they've got themselves high enough up the table where they're already secured a playoff spot, cool. It may leave them sweating to see if other teams pass them, or they may already be out and it's too late for them to do anything about it. So it is really an unsure one having the bye in that last round. Especially if you're not like top of the conference. Like the Crusaders knew they would be staying in Christchurch when they had the bye in the last round, whereas other teams, you can't really travel early because you don't know where you're going to go until the round is done and dusted. The Bulls, they had a good schedule last year. This one's okay. They don't leave South Africa until I think round 7, which is not too bad, but again, they don't get a bye either side of that travel. So 2 away games in South Africa, a bye in the third round is not ideal, but it's doable. 3 home games, and then their trip to to New Zealand and Australia, Reds, Waratahs, Hurricanes, Chiefs, then a home game against the Lions, and then a bye. Put that bye 1 week earlier and put the Lions 1 week later. I think that works a lot better. At least they get to come back from Australia and New Zealand, have a rest up, and then they resume action. But no, it's straight back into it and then a rest after they don't as much need it. But they do finish off with 2 of their 3 final games being at home, although there is a trip to Argentina there as well. So that could actually even be a bad schedule, given that the final 3 games you got South Africa, well, it's Pretoria, Buenos Aires, Pretoria. Tough. The Lions, I think, actually do pretty well out of the schedule this year. Their first game is away in Argentina, but I think that kind of works having it in round 1. Same with the Hurricanes starting in South Africa. If it's in round 1, you can plan for it. You can go to Argentina early. 2 home games. Then there's the bye before they travel to Australia. So if they want to travel early, they can do it. I'm harping on about it, but I think it only makes sense. They're 4 away games, then they're back home in South Africa for the next 4 weeks, then a bye, and then more games in South Africa to finish off the season. So 3 of their final 4 games are at home, and there's no travel outside the country for those final 4. Even for the final 5 after that bye, they're all based in South Africa. So decent news for the Lions. And finally for the Stormers, who've generally had a pretty tough one, I think their schedule is actually not too bad as well. 4 of their 5 first games are at home. Hurricanes at home, Bulls at home, Lions away, then Jaguares and Blues at home before they get a bye. That's a nicely placed bye. 4 or 5 games. If you win at home, get yourself well up the table, do a Rebels, and then actually manage to retain it for a season. A couple of away games, a couple of home games. They got that awkward thing with the bye, then a home game, then their trip. So they do have their trip late. Their trip will probably be the make or break of their year, which has been the way of things recently. But they do have the Sunwolves away on their trip. I know I said I wasn't looking too much in the strength of schedule, but I think that's an advantage. Chiefs and Crusaders are going to be tough, but then Brumbies and Sunwolves away, Lions at home, Bulls away. They don't leave South Africa until round 7 as well. So if they can get themselves established early, I think the the Stormers can crack on and do a job. So yeah, that's all the teams. When I was writing this out, every time I would write their opponent and underneath it, I would write H or A if it's home or away. But if some of these teams have got home and away, home and away, home and away, so it looks like ha ha ha. Especially the Crusaders. It's like they're laughing at me. Anyway, whether or not the travel factor and whatnot makes a huge difference to Super Rugby remains to be seen. Hopefully some of the teams who benefit, like the Lions, I think benefit pretty well from some decent planning, can kick on. Other teams whose planning is perhaps not as good, it'll be interesting to see how they manage it. But from research I've done in the past, the travel factor doesn't seem to be as impactful as like just the home and away thing. So yeah, it might be an interesting one to track for 2020 as well. You guys let me know your thoughts. How well do you think these teams are going to go? If you have a look at your own team schedule, what do you think are kind of the good points about it or the bad points? And yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.